Morning, everyone. Today we're going to just go over I hope to address 5 questions. What is social isolation? What causes it? How does it affect our communities? How will your business or your nonprofit be part of the solution? Many of you already are. Hopefully what I say gives you maybe another set of words to describe it. And what will success look like? So the first one is that at its core, social isolation occurs when a community is okay with throwing humans away. That every time I sort of say it that way, it kind of hurts somewhere inside. And, because do not like to throw things away that are useful. My view of isolation in Los Angeles is we work with people who are coming out of incarceration as well as people who are aging in life. Both sets of people who we very easily throw away. So I have not worked much with people with disabilities, but we have a lot in common because we are working with people with extraordinary potential. The second thought is, I really think that businesses have the opportunity to lead by revealing the potential of all humans, and it's in part because business people are so incensed about waste. When you hear about dead weight loss, when you don't want inefficiency in an economy, and there's a lot of waste in our economy, but it's human capital waste. The final thing is that we will all be bringing a unique expression to what I call the dance of building connection. And what matters most in this dance is the overall pattern. It's not the specific thing that you're doing or that they're doing or that they're not doing. It's the overall pattern that matters. I think there can sometimes be angst when nonprofits and for-profit organizations are together. It's kind of, if you think back to a high school dance, people are kind of wallflowers. There can be angst because I think that there are some awkward ways in which nonprofits interact with for-profit companies and vice versa. There are some dysfunctional ways, so let's just acknowledge that. And one of my mentors has this saying: "There is no profit without nonprofits." What does that mean? For me, what I think it means is that when you think about the bottom line, you think about the financial pages of a business's guts, basically. The impact, the bottom line, the sort of social and community impact of a nonprofit goes directly, sometimes invisibly, into the bottom line of the companies in our community. So the business plans of nonprofits and for-profit companies are intertwined, and we just have to acknowledge that. Nonprofits should insist on that and should be helping business leaders to see that this is the case. Every business depends on some level of a community functioning, and not only functioning, but thriving. And when big portions of a community are not, that is bad for business, and we have to get good at drawing those lines because it is kind of an invisible part of what we do. If there's no profit without nonprofits, instead of sort of being wallflowers, we're going to come together and welcome to the dance. What kind of a dance am I talking about when I talk about building connection across the city? Okay, you get the message. It's beautiful, but I don't think that building social connection in a city like this is going to look quite like this. I had much more in mind this kind of dancing.
I'll dance this way.
Okay, so I'm a guy from LA, and I had never heard of bluegrass clogging before. And I'm going to tell everybody about it because I think it's the best kind of dancing. It's clearly the best kind of dancing. And what I like about it, I've thought about this, there's a pattern. There is a clear overall pattern, but there is also chaos, a sense of individual chaos, collective chaos. And it's just exuberant, right? You're not there's not one way of bringing it to life. And that's what I think it's going to take for nonprofits and for businesses and for government to work together. Is there's going to be an overall pattern, but it's going to be a little chaotic. It's going to feel exuberant, and it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun too. That's what building connection is. It's a lot of fun. So I'm not a dance expert, but one of my favorite quotes of all time comes from the matriarch of modern dance in America. Her name's Martha Graham. She has this saying: there is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. So Martha Graham is talking about what dancers do when they do what they do well. But this also applies to humans and to businesses and organizations when they do well what they do well. So I really like this idea of unique expression, and I know that that's a value that Starfire holds true as well. This is something that businesses also should know well. If a business is successful, it has been able to specialize in something and excel and provide something that is distinctly of value. And every business, every organization, every individual, every leader will know what this is. You may not know what that is yet, but reaching for your unique expression is part of what it means for us to all be playing a role in building social connection in Cincinnati. So we'll come back to this thought later. So profit and purpose. Before we dive too much into social isolation, I just want to say a few things about my view of this. So if you talk to anybody in my world who works in sort of corporate philanthropy, they will say things like this. 70% of consumers say they'd pay full price for a product to support a cause they believe in over discounted products. So consumers today are fairly savvy in terms of the implications of their purchases, and they like how they spend to reflect their values for the most part. Employees too. So 45% of employees report they take a 15% pay cut for a job that makes a positive social or environmental impact. If anybody here has a child or a student who is sort of in the midst of a career search, you know how much meaningful work is important to young people. 1 in 4 companies have altered their corporate mission in the last 3 years to reflect a larger societal purpose. So it's the consumer and employee sentiment is having some effect. At the same time, 4 out of 5 executives lack confidence that their brand, their company's philanthropy programs are effective in meeting social impact goals. So there's a skepticism from within business about businesses actually doing good. And we see this in the evolution of the way that businesses engage with their communities. So just really quickly, I think a lot of the way businesses approached their communities at first and still are through the lens of charity, right? Cutting a check, which is great. And then eventually through CSR, which is corporate social responsibility, right? Not just cutting a check, but maybe cutting a check at a regular interval and doing other things at a regular interval that make it more of a discipline. And then finally, the latest manifestation is what's called shared value. And this is a recognition that even something like doing good in a company has become very isolated in a team called a social responsibility team, and that what really needs to happen is to really infuse what companies do across business units with purpose. So this is just a broad evolution of how the field has evolved over the last 2 or 3 decades. So to understand what social isolation is, we actually have to understand what the opposite is first. So I call social isolation untethered because untethered evokes a lot of things for me, but what does it mean to be tethered together? So the average person has between 3 to 7 people who you would consider strong ties. So this is your intimate network. These are the people that you confide in, who you lean on, who you instinctively want to mark life's ups and downs with. So 3 to 7 strong ties. The average person then has about 6 to 34 medium ties. This is what some really smart people call the effective network. These are the people who help you deal with everyday life. Probably your coworkers, your neighbors, some friends and relatives. And then finally, most people have an outermost ring of people consisting of 100 to 400 weak ties. And these are the people who you can bring into your effective network on an as-needed basis, right? When you're traveling to Toronto and need something, you might activate your weaker ties in that other country. But for all sorts of reasons, some that are natural to the rhythms of life, and some that we've created, so man-made causes, there are many people around us who don't have these ties in the quantity or quality that they desire. So the simplest way to define social isolation is that it's a deficit in human relationships. It's a deficit in human relationships. It's a discrepancy between the quantity or quality of human connections that you desire in your life versus the human connections that you do have. And that's a little bit complicated for describing it. I really like to view it like this. Social isolation is the feeling and the reality that you lack access to worlds beyond your own. When you see it that way, it's really a universal thing. It's part of the human experience. Raise your hands if there's been a part of your life when you have felt like you lacked access to worlds beyond your own. Most people. So, and the difference, which we'll talk about in a bit, is that some people choose this and other people don't. They don't have the choice. So a little bit about the state of isolation in America. A widely published study says 1 in 4 Americans, and this is back in 2004, said they have 0 people in their network with whom to discuss important matters. And this is a common question to gauge the quality of somebody's intimate network, the people that you can confide in. So 1 in 4 said they have 0 people. 1 in 3 young adults with autism spectrum disorder have virtually no social contact whatsoever beyond their primary caregiver. 15 cigarettes a day, that's how much researchers estimate the health consequences of loneliness linked to social isolation are. So if you're paying attention to the national discourse on social isolation and loneliness, it's really being championed by the medical professional community. So it's being medicalized in a way, and I think that's important. I think it's also important to remember that it is beyond sort of just health. This is a human issue. And that $7 billion, this is according to AARP, in additional Medicare spending each year due to social isolation among older Americans. So there are costs to it. So what causes it? In 2001, a guy named Robert Putnam published a book you may have heard about called Bowling Alone. And Bowling Alone named a bunch of possible reasons, some of which have been substantiated for the causes of isolation, and I'll just go through those real quick. A lot of them have been called technologies of isolation, so you can sort of think, and not everybody will agree that these are causes, so it is up for debate. But automobiles, cars, television, single-family detached homes. So in 1950, 10% of households were single-person households, which is different from single-family, but so 10% of households were single-person. In 2016, 30% of households are single-person households. Another cause of social isolation that you might not have thought about, the fading memory of World War being something that brings people together across diverse backgrounds. The decline of civic associations. Who here grew up in a family where you had a family member, maybe a parent or uncle, who was part of Elks, Rotary, Lions, any of these organizations? Big? Is anybody a member today? Awesome. Which one?
Rotary.
Awesome. Rotary is the most sort of vibrant of them all to this day. Another cause, some people say, suburbs, so combined with the single-family detached homes. Smartphones. This is an interesting one because we obviously think about certain types of smartphone technologies as being fundamentally connective. When you look across time, young people or just people in general spend their days in relatively stable ways. So the amount of time that people spend sleeping has been approximately the same for many decades. The amount of time that we spend at work is very stable. Then there's a category of your day that is what some people call survival. And that has also been pretty stable. So this is like providing for your family, cooking, eating, doing the chores. And then there's just this like sliver of every day that is your personal time. And in 2007, about 50% of your personal time was spent in front of a screen. And in 2017, 90% of the average American's time is spent in front of a screen. It might be with a loved one or a friend or something, but the amount of your personal time spent sort of just being is a tiny sliver of our daily hours. And then there are a bunch of other man-made things. So the legacies of segregation are the same story of social isolation and have to be discussed with the causes. So the separation of people by age, by wealth. This is a place where I used to live, Skid Row in Los Angeles, which is the largest population of unhoused people in the United States, with population too many. Segregation by race and segregation by ability. So these are painful, intertwined histories that we need to bring into the conversation. And the sum total of all of these causes of isolation, I like to really think of it as cocoons. Now, the trouble here is that we create and we want, to a certain extent, as consumers, we want cocoons. And so we become really good at creating cocoons and interacting with only the people that we want to interact with. It becomes way more problematic when we have created cocoons for others, out of which they can't escape on their own. And that's a lot of what I'm talking about today. So what are then the consequences of isolation as we've just understood it? I love spending time in the mountains. In California, we have sequoia trees. And sequoia trees, as far as we know, are one of the, maybe the one or two largest living specimens on Earth. And sequoias are the way that I think about human potential. So humans can do extraordinary things. You know that. Many humans can do extraordinary things. And what a social isolation does is it leaves people, instead of becoming big, beautiful trees, they're sort of don't have the opportunity because they're denied the kind of relationships that help make things happen in our lives. So the story of isolation, I think, is a story about wasted people, wasted potential. It's a story about how easy it's become to throw humans away. And they're just say this sentence to yourself. I think it's startling. Every time I sort of think about isolation this way, it's startling to me. It's like, how did it become like this? Like, we don't think of ourselves as people who allow people to go to waste. But somehow it doesn't just happen, it happens at an industrial level almost. This is a woman named Teresa, who she was somebody who was allowed to go to waste. So she was addicted to all sorts of drugs and alcohol. She lived on the streets, and then she committed a bunch of crimes that landed her in jail, a women's jail in Los Angeles. And after she was let out, she by in good fortune, came across a nonprofit called LA Kitchen that helped to reveal her human potential and helped her not go to waste, even though she fits to a T the type of person who we would just kind of throw away. And today, she's a chef in Los Angeles who is at the center of the healthy senior eating movement. She teaches cooking classes around the city and is probably the number one force for bringing people of all ages, all backgrounds together in kitchens, right? And revealing the power of food, revealing the potential of all people. So wasted people who we would otherwise let go to waste, are some of the most powerful agents of change that we have. And so the story of social connection in America is a profound story about communities waking up. And so the thing, when I am in front of funders, philanthropists, CEOs, the one thing that I want them to realize is that building social connection is not optional. Sometimes it gets pigeonholed as something that's fluffy, or maybe too qualitative, maybe not scalable enough. But there are a lot of stories that are intertwined with the story of social isolation that you read about, that matter. And so social isolation really is a bedrock issue. You may not see it sort of on the surface, but it is underneath a ton of the things that are national emergencies. And so I hope you see that and consider the power, the sort of multifaceted power of a dollar spent building human connection. It's a really good use of money. And we need to be advocates for this. Now, at this point, when we're thinking about social isolation, there may be like a heavy feeling, right? Like this is it's a big issue, but it reminds me of the Greek myth of Sisyphus, who was punished by the Greek gods to push a massive boulder up a hill for eternity. And each time Sisyphus makes progress, the boulder comes crashing down to the bottom of the hill. And some people think, well, isn't isolation always just going to be there? And can we really make progress on this? So I talked about dance earlier and this idea of unique expression. It's going to look different for how businesses plug in and for how nonprofits, frankly, or individuals plug in. And the thing is, there are many ways, and I just want to get you thinking about a few different ways. So some businesses and individuals in our community will function as bulldozers, right? By dismantling barriers that keep people isolated. Candace told that story in Starfire's own story of how there were barriers that Starfire itself created which needed to be taken down. And the reason why, when Tim reached out, I decided immediately to come was because that is a powerful and rare story of people who choose to dismantle the barriers that they've created themselves. Powerful. And so you can ask, as a business person, who will we hire? It's a very important question when we think about building social connection in a city. And who will live here is a big question for developers, and a hard and obviously politicized one. Some businesses will be pinball machines by serving as hubs for connecting people. So but it's not just who comes through the door, who's our patrons, because you can have a great bar or coffee shop or library, and people are coming in the doors, but they're not connecting. And so it's going that extra step. Who are we connecting? How are our employees connecting? Some businesses will be WD-40 by enabling partners to do their jobs more efficiently. Maybe you're a software company or an accounting firm or some business that may not be like a natural place where community happens. You can't really think of barriers that you created yourself. but you have some unique asset, right? Some skill, some human talent that can help make another company or another nonprofit's mission come together. And these types of business partners make a big difference. So which community connectors are we positioned to support is a good question for WD-40 folks. Some businesses will be megaphones, amplifying stories of connection. And so the question here is, in what ways can we lend our platform? Very practical, but very a great way to add value to community connectors. And then some businesses, and especially foundations, will be tree planters by making investments with a longer time horizon. So how can we ensure that social connection becomes and remains a priority? I want to thank you all for being here on a Friday morning, for showing up, and just being part of this conversation.